In this true crime documentary, we uncover the heartbreaking case of 33-year-old mom, Michelle Chaffin.
That he should be convicted of murder and he should be executed. And I believe in that. I believe in an eye for an eye. I don't think that he should just spend the rest of his life in prison.
And he says he wants that, by the way. He told Sarah, I want them to execute me. I don't want to live the rest of my life in prison.
Honestly, I'd like to see him hung. If he snapped her neck, then I think that's the nicest way for him to go.
On the morning of Monday, September 24th, 2012, the polished glass doors of HDES law firm in Houston, Texas, opened as they always did. But that morning, beneath the rhythm of the usual routine, something quietly felt off. Attorneys moved through the corridors, calling out for case files. Assistants tapped away on keyboards. But one name kept being called without answer. Michelle Chaffin, the new paralegal hired just 3 months earlier, whom known for arriving before everyone else and having all documents prepped and highlighted, was nowhere to be found. One of the lawyers finally picked up the phone and called her supervisor, who quickly confirmed. Michelle had not shown up. Calls to her cell phone went unanswered once, then again. And when her direct manager reached out to her emergency contact, her brother David, he too sounded worried. He hadn't heard from her, but promised he would start checking around and try to track her down. That same day, David made a call to someone who should have known more than anyone. Mark Castellano, the man Michelle had shared a home with, and the father of her son. Mark said they had argued over the weekend, and he had left the house taking their child with him. He claimed the last time he saw Michelle was Saturday night as he walked out the door. David spent hours trying to connect the dots, but none of the pieces led anywhere. And when Michelle's absence became undeniable, her manager finally alerted local law enforcement, prompting the first official report. Still at that point, Michelle's family believed there had to be some logical explanation. Maybe she needed space. Maybe this was all just a misunderstanding. But by Tuesday morning, that hope shattered when her ex-husband called to say Michelle had missed the scheduled pickup with their daughter. Something she would never do. It was in that exact moment the family called the police themselves. This wasn't just a delay. This wasn't just a missed day at work. Michelle had disappeared. And when Detective Danny Dozier arrived to begin the investigation, he had no idea that he was about to step into one of the most tragic and emotionally charged cases of his career, involving the vanishing of a devoted mother and the dark unraveling of a life that had looked so full of promise on the surface. Because what lay ahead would be a chain of discoveries that no one could have predicted. The first step Detective Danny Dozier took was to sit down with Michelle's family, expecting it to be a routine conversation. Something he had done countless times before in similar cases where an adult had simply walked away from their life for a few days, often returning with either a reasonable explanation or none at all. But they almost always returned. Yet what he heard inside that modest home turned his expectations upside down. Michelle was 31 years old, a woman who had recently relocated to Houston after accepting a promising new job opportunity at a respected legal firm. And instead of living on her own, she had moved in with Mark Castellano, the father of her son. A decision that at first seemed confusing, until her family explained that this was not a romantic reunion, but a temporary solution born out of necessity, because Mark had left Michelle shortly after the birth of their child, and now her moving into his home was meant to provide their son with support, while giving her a chance to settle quickly, especially since Mark's house was just 10 minutes from her new workplace. Detective Dozier understood that the arrangement, although unusual, was practical. But then came the detail that shifted the weight of the entire conversation. Michelle was a fiercely committed mother. She had never missed a moment with her kids. And the very idea that she would leave her child behind without explanation, or fail to collect her daughter as planned, was described by her family as simply impossible. He left that house with the weight of new doubt forming in his mind. The facts did not add up. A mother who disappears yet leaves behind her phone, her car, and her children. A woman who lived under the same roof with her former partner, but wasn't in a relationship with him. Every single clue pointed away from the idea that Michelle had simply walked away. And every instinct told him this was not a case of someone stepping out needing space. Something else had happened, something far more complicated, and the only person who might hold the missing answers was the one man still within reach, Mark Castellano.
She and I were not together romantically. physically friends. We were not even friends. We just tolerated each other for the best of cadence. I came back home and we got to a fight. Goes back into her room. That's just door. The master bedroom, that's her bedroom, has the back doors that go to the parking area. And a little bit later, I go in there to confirm she was gone.
Was this on Friday or Saturday?
This is all on Saturday.
Okay.
All on Saturday.
Mark, where are you now?
I came home to Odessa, Texas. I'm with my family. I call my parents, and I'm like, I need help with Kate because she has a history of leaving and not coming back. I went there and came back twice.
Well, we're going to have to speak to you in person. Are you going to be able to make it back to Houston?
I can come up if we get her something.
Yes, please. Where do you think Michelle is at now?
Little drug user. She's somewhere, all strung out. And when she decides to finally talk to somebody, she will.
As uncomfortable as the phone call was between Detective Danny and Mark. Not just because of Mark's tone, which lacked any sign of concern or respect for the mother of his child, but also because of how he portrayed Michelle, painting her as an unstable woman who often argued and lost control. The most disturbing part wasn't his attitude, it was what he claimed next. Mark said Michelle had been using illegal substances, and if that information turned out to be true, then everything about this case would shift in an instant, opening the door to countless dark possibilities. Maybe she had gone out to buy drugs and was taken. Maybe she decided to walk away from her life on her own terms. Or maybe something far worse had happened to her at the hands of someone deep in that dangerous world. After ending the call, Detective Dozier immediately ran a check through the system, looking into Michelle's background. And what he found at that moment seemed to support everything Mark had just said. Or at least, that's what the official record suggested. Michelle had been arrested back in 2002 for possession of cocaine, and had served 2 years in custody, followed by a mandatory rehabilitation program. This was not the woman her family had described, and for a brief moment, it felt like the entire image they painted of a devoted, responsible mother might be a lie. But what the detective didn't know yet was that the family had shared the full truth, a truth the system couldn't explain with a few lines in a file. Yes, Michelle had been arrested, and yes, she had struggled. But the full story was far more complicated than the cold report suggested. She had originally been prescribed controlled medication while still married and covered by her husband's insurance. But after their divorce, she was forced to turn to street sources to access the same medication, and when her ex successfully gained custody of their daughter. Michelle fell deeper into dependency. Still, that was nearly a decade ago, and for the past 8 years she had fought her way back, rebuilding her life and trying to be present for her kids every single day. According to those closest to her, she had succeeded, while the family tried to explain all of this to the detective, insisting that if anyone had a reason to harm or mislead investigators, it would be the very man who was now describing Michelle as an irresponsible addict, Mark Castellano. While all of this back and forth was happening inside the station, someone else was watching the investigation unfold from a distance, and felt she could no longer stay silent. Stephanie Helton. Stephanie, along with a close group of friends, had known Michelle well, and had never trusted Mark for a second, and as the hours dragged on without answers, they became more and more certain that he was the one who knew exactly where Michelle was, and what had really happened to her. Fueled by that fear, Stephanie reached out to every local news station she could find, pushing hard to give Michelle's name a voice before her story disappeared into silence.
When Michelle Warner mysteriously vanished last week, her family and friends became highly suspicious. Loved ones say her disappearance is not really like her at all.
We love her. She's a huge part of our family, and we want her back. We want to bring her home.
After the disappearance of a 31-year-old mother gripped all of Texas with concern, and headlines began filling the local broadcasts, there was a wave of social pressure mounting by the hour demanding answers, which ultimately forced authorities to escalate the case within the same week, transferring it entirely to the Homicide Division, the largest and most well-resourced department in the region. On that day, the investigation was handed to a man known not only for his experience, but also for his sharp instincts and quiet brilliance, Detective Phil Waters. When Detective Waters arrived at Michelle's home, he expected to find an empty hallway and a quiet front door. But what he saw instead was something that immediately told him this was no ordinary missing persons case. Neighbors, friends, people who knew Michelle well, all standing outside waiting for him, faces heavy with frustration, all pointing in one direction, all certain of one thing. Mark Castellano was responsible for what happened to her. But Waters didn't begin where the public wanted him to. He didn't chase after theories or pressure from voices on the sidewalk. He began where all detectives are trained to begin, at the scene. And it was inside that modest apartment that the story started twisting into something stranger than he could have imagined. The first thing that stood out was the silence. No broken furniture, no signs of forced entry, just a stillness that didn't feel right. But there was something else. A sharp chemical odor coming from near the computer desk. And despite it being 6 days since Michelle had vanished, the smell was still strong. That in itself was alarming. Then came something even more troubling. The house computer had no hard drive. It had been removed completely. Whatever information lived inside that machine had been taken with it. In the bedroom, investigators found a handwritten note, a letter scrawled in Mark's handwriting, telling Michelle he had taken their son and gone to stay with family. But it wasn't the message itself that disturbed Waters. It was the language, the aggression, the contempt, words filled with anger. A tone that matched perfectly with what Mark had told officers earlier about their fight the night Michelle vanished. There was no physical evidence, no weapon, no body, no trace of a struggle. According to official standards, the apartment could not even be classified as a crime scene. And yet Waters couldn't shake the feeling that something had happened right in front of him. Something that left behind no fingerprints, but carried a presence. He would later admit that as he stood in front of her closet, he felt something unexplainable, as if the space itself was whispering that there was something more to be seen. When the team left, they had no hard evidence in hand. But outside that apartment, the voices were growing louder. Search teams, flyers, news vans, all wanting one thing: to find Michelle. And as investigators retraced her last known steps on the day she vanished, the story of the missing mother spread beyond Texas, across state lines, into national news, and everyone wants to more about Michelle Chaffin. Born June 6, 1981 in Humble, Texas, Michelle Lee Chaffin was a social girl from the very beginning. Warm, talkative, naturally charming, with a bright smile and soft features. People who knew her described her as the kind of woman who walked into a room and made it feel lighter. She had an energy that pulled people close. But behind that glow was a life shaped by challenge. At 19, she moved to Houston to build something new. She studied criminal justice in college and dreamed of becoming a lawyer. In 2001, she gave birth to her daughter Haley. Her marriage ended 2 years later, and custody of Haley was awarded to her ex-husband Michael Warner. In 2008, Michelle met Mark Castellano while working as a secretary in a medical office where he handled IT. Their connection was fast. Within a few months, she was pregnant. In 2009, she gave birth to their son Caden. But the relationship was fragile. Mark left, vanished for over 2 years, then reappeared in 2012 when Michelle suggested a temporary co-living arrangement. Not out of love, but for the sake of their son. Mark agreed and moved in. What most people found strange was not the situation itself, but the imbalance. Mark was far from attractive, yet Michelle was striking, beautiful, always put together, and those who knew her couldn't understand why she had chosen to align her life, even temporarily, with someone like him. After her divorce, Michelle's life spiraled for a time. She fell into the wrong circles, was arrested for possession, but entered rehab, and according to everyone around her, stayed clean for more than 8 years. She took every opportunity she could, and finally landed the position she had dreamed of, a paralegal at law firm in Houston. Everything was starting to fall into place, until it all vanished, as the mystery surrounding the disappearance of a 31-year-old mother continued to stir suspicion across Texas. The story quickly grew beyond the state's borders, until it caught the attention of someone no one expected. Dr. Phil, not just a television host, but one of the most widely recognized names in the world. The team behind the iconic show decided this case needed a national spotlight. The missing hard drive, the hostile letter, the aggressive attempt to portray Michelle as an unfit mother. All of it was raising serious questions, and Dr. Phil wanted answers. His senior producer, Sarah, began reaching out to the one person who seemed to be at the center of every doubt, Mark Castellano. She contacted him directly, pushed for a response, but Mark didn't give her anything solid. He said he needed time to think, said he wasn't sure if he wanted to speak publicly. But while Mark was thinking, something else was happening behind closed doors. Inside the Houston Homicide Division, a new decision had been made, a decision that would reshape the investigation completely. A task force was formed, led by 3 key names: Detective Phil Waters, Detective Danny Dozier, who had been on the case from day one, and Sergeant Brian Harris. Their first priority was to trace Michelle's last known movements, and most importantly, to verify whether Mark's story could hold up under scrutiny. According to him, Michelle had stormed out through the back door during their argument. If that was true, it could mean she left of her own will, and that someone else may have crossed her path, someone not yet on their radar. But then the detectives found something they didn't expect. The first real blow to Mark's timeline. Directly across from Michelle's home stood a business, one with a security camera pointed straight toward the residence. Although the footage was low quality and heavily blurred, it still had the potential to reveal critical details. If Michelle had left through the back door, that camera might show her. If another vehicle had pulled up, that camera could catch it. The investigators reviewed the footage frame by frame, looking for movement, and what they found changed everything. Michelle's car never moved. Not once. But another car did. Mark's. And not just once, but twice. Detectives felt that for the first time, they were closing in on something solid, a piece of the puzzle that might finally break the case open, a thread they could follow into something tangible. But just as they started to believe, they were one step closer to the truth. Detective Danny said something that shattered all their momentum.
I went there and came back twice.
Well,
Mark had mentioned during his first phone call with investigators that he left the house and returned twice on the night Michelle went missing. That detail conveniently explained why his car had been seen moving 2 separate times. But what no one knew yet was whether those trips were truly about collecting his son's belongings, or if he had been transporting something else entirely. For now, the detectives were back to square one, once again searching for clarity in a fog of uncertainty. That was when Detective Waters made a choice to go back to the surveillance footage. But this time he wasn't focused on the moment Mark entered the house. He rolled the video back to when Michelle first arrived home that evening. That's when a new name entered the picture: Michael Russell, Michelle's current boyfriend. A man whose relationship with her had not been smooth. Their history was filled with tension, and now his name sat on the table. Detective Danny Dozier was assigned to track his movements, and surprisingly, his task wasn't difficult at all. Michael wasn't hiding. He was actively searching for Michelle, participating in community efforts, handing out flyers. He even had video evidence of where he had gone the night she vanished, a time-stamped alibi that clearly documented his whereabouts after dropping her off. Within a short time, Michael was removed from the list of suspects. But before he stepped away, he gave the detectives something entirely different, a new motive. Michael told them that Mark had always shown signs of deep jealousy, that he became visibly upset anytime Michael picked up or dropped off Michelle. That despite their separation, Mark never truly accepted that she had moved on. Michelle had tried to make it clear. She told Mark they were over. She had the right to be with someone she loved. She was proud of the life she was building. And that life infuriated him. Michael painted a picture that looked nothing like the narrative Mark had tried to push. This was not a reckless mother spiraling back into bad habits. This was a strong and vibrant woman, a mother who had worked her way back from the edge, a woman Mark had abandoned when their son was only 3 months old, only to return years later and find her rebuilding, thriving, falling in love again, and ready to pursue her career in law. The investigators knew the emotional trigger, but they still didn't have the full picture. They knew the why, but they didn't know the how, or more importantly, they didn't have proof. That's when they decided it was time to speak to Mark again. They called to request that he come in for questioning, but instead of resisting, he asked something unexpected. He wanted to know what they thought about him going on the Dr. Phil show. The detectives didn't object. And just one day before he was scheduled to sit with law enforcement, Mark Castellano sat across from Dr. Phil under the bright studio lights. What Mark didn't realize was that Dr. Phil wasn't going to be fooled easily, and what was about to unfold on national television would unravel far more than he ever intended to reveal.
Another suspicious thing, there were hard drives in the computers, and you took those out when you left to come up here. Why did you do that?
She took hard drives out of my truck that were my personal drives that I had taken.
So you drive around with hard drives?
Yes, sir. Now, when Houston PD contacted me, I told them that I took the drives.
Well, you said you would show them to me when
yes,
I came here today.
I have the drives.
Do you have them here?
Yes.
Can we look at them?
Yeah, I'll bring them to you. One second. No, I don't have them because he still has them. He's still copying.
Okay, well, you can come back.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
I thought he brought them back, but he didn't.
What Mark did during that taped interview, intended to air the following Wednesday, became the clearest signal yet to millions of viewers across the country that he wasn't telling the truth. If he could lie about something as specific and easily disproven as the missing hard drive on national television, then what else was he hiding? But what no one inside the Dr. Phil production team could have predicted was that the very next day, while Mark sat inside an interrogation room, he would reach out to them again, but with the truth. That morning, Mark showed up for his official questioning, and this time it was Detective Phil Waters who personally requested to handle the interview. Because despite everything they had so far, the rumors, the surveillance footage, the inconsistencies, the jealousy, the missing hard drive, none of it was enough. They still had no physical evidence, no forensic confirmation, and no direct proof that Mark was involved. All they had was motive, shared by Michael. That's why Detective Waters made a calculated decision. He would use one of the most powerful techniques in the book, a psychological strategy rooted not in confrontation, but in understanding, in empathy, in justification. It's called good choice, bad choice, a method where the investigator offers the suspect an emotional escape route, allowing them to believe that their mistake was the result of a greater cause, a bigger right, a decision made not out of evil, but out of desperation, protection, or justice. In Mark's case, Detective Waters carefully constructed the room around that premise. He told him he understood, that he believed Michelle had treated him badly, that she had been unfair, that she had created a toxic environment for him and their son. He had reached a point where he had no choice left. And Mark listened, because for the first time since this began, he was being told not that he was a monster, but that he was a man caught in an impossible situation. Detective Waters leaned in closer, and slowly, Mark started talking. He didn't know that every word he was about to say would pull him deeper into the very truth he had tried to avoid from the beginning. But once he opened the door, there would be no turning back.
What happened between you and Michelle in the course of her cursing at you, slapping you in the face, hitting you while you're on your knees on the ground, picking up stuff that she has directed you to do, that was just the straw that broke the camel's back. And now Mark is in protective mode for Caden. This is not happening anymore. Michelle is not going to harm my son anymore, either emotionally or physically or verbally or in any way, shape, or form, and I am going to have to resolve the problem now. The opportunity to talk about all those things, because you've told me. You've already told me. You've laid the groundwork for what happened in that apartment. And I'm on board with you. This isn't about trying to make Mark look like a bad guy. I'm telling you, I could not. I'm listening to your story, man, and I almost want to cry for you. I just can't imagine the stress and the pressure put on you because of the love you have for Caden when you watch this woman continually berate him and treat him so terribly, because she's doing the same thing to you that she's doing to a 3-year-old, and you're an adult. I need you to explain to me what happened. We both know. Michelle did not walk out of that apartment. She did not walk out of that apartment. We both know it. We both know the circumstances under which whatever did happen, happened. I'm not wanting you to explain to me that you wanted to hurt Michelle. I want you to explain to me what you felt like you had to do to protect Caden.
She got up, and I got up, and she's getting dressed, and she's finishing up, and she's still yelling, and Caden's hiding. I grabbed her and I broke her neck. It controlled me the rest of my life, and I grabbed her by her neck, and and just went threw her on the bed. And
so she's facing you?
Yeah, and I heard it pop, and then her tongue fucked up, it popped out, and that was it.
Okay.
I mean, I sit there and held it, and the time I realized what I did, she was dead.
After delivering a full confession, Mark proceeded to reenact exactly what had happened that night. He told investigators that he placed Michelle's body inside the bedroom closet, then later moved her into his car. He said he drove for nearly 8 hours toward Odessa, Texas, then returned home once again. According to him, Michelle's body remained inside the vehicle in that same box for 24 hours before he finally disposed of her. But what shocked investigators most was what happened after they left the room. Mark calmly picked up the phone, called Sarah, the producer from the Dr. Phil show, and told her everything too. He also contacted his parents, his friends, sharing the same horrific details without hesitation, all while sitting in the interview room, eating and showing no sign of remorse. The next step for the detectives was to locate the exact area where Michelle had been taken. Mark gave them a vague idea of the region, and after days of combing through maps and driving remote roads, Officer Casey finally discovered her remains. The autopsy confirmed Michelle had died by strangulation, but the report also revealed something else, something that silenced every lie Mark had tried to spread. There were no traces of drugs in her system, no signs of any substance abuse, nothing to support the image he had spent so long painting. It was as if her body, in its final stillness, was delivering one last message to the world, that Mark Castellano was not just a man who could not tell the truth. He was someone who had built his entire defense on a fabrication. And yet in court, despite his detailed confession, despite the reenactment, despite the evidence, Mark Castellano stood before the judge and pleaded not guilty. The trial stretched across weeks, back and forth debates, arguments from both sides. But eventually, the verdict came, 26 years behind bars, and instead of regret, instead of shame, Mark did something no one saw coming. He smiled and thanked the jury, as if they had given him a gift he didn't even deserve. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe for more true crime documentaries. See you in the next video.